Okay, so the next one is this one here, an instant response, Splunk, boss of the SOC. This is a capture the flag competition that Splunk made several years ago. They had a whole series of them every year, and I played this one when it was new and we did well, and I thought it was awesome. And so I put it on a cloud server, two cloud servers, so you can use it pre-installed. Splunk is already installed on the server, and a whole bunch of data is already installed on the server. What these guys did was they set up in Amazon a corporate network with 4 or 5 servers, and then they attacked it with a bunch of standard attack tools, and they recorded all that. So you can use Splunk to hunt for it. Now, Splunk is Google for log data. So anyway, you go to the project and you open one of the Splunk servers. The Splunk servers are just splunk.samsclass.info and splunk2.samsclass.info. They're both the same. And when you go to it, there's a login, student one and student one, because Splunk, one of the great things about Splunk is there's a free version which has all the features. So your students can train on the real thing. The only thing missing is you cannot record much live data. You can only look at archive data in quantity. And the other thing is everybody's always logged in as administrator. You cannot make a less than administrator account in the free version, which is really makes it useless for real production work. It also means that people can trash my servers, which they do now and then. And automated attacks would trash my servers, so I put it behind a basic authentication of just student one, which stops the automated attacks. So when you get here, search and reporting is the only tab we're going to use. And Splunk is also called Google for log data. That's all it is. It's just a database, but it's designed for searching log data. And here you see we have about 1 million events indexed from 8 years ago. By the way, Splunk has a limitation that it won't let you search data older than 5 years, which is why when you connect to this server, it'll give you a warning. I couldn't figure out how to adjust that, so I just set the clock on my server to several years back. That's why it warns you. My server time is set years ago, so this old data will still be searchable. So by default, Splunk only searches for the last 24 hours, which is not going to do us any good since the data is 8 years old. But we can look at data summary here and get a quick start to understand what this data is. And the thing about Splunk, the product itself is just an easy way to search through logs. The complexity is actually not Splunk, it's the nature of the logs themselves. So if you look at source types to see what kind of data is in here, Windows event logs are in here, Windows registry information, and then Sysmon. Sysmon is a fantastic tool from Microsoft, from sysinternals, which Microsoft bought, which takes the Windows event logs, which are very confusing. If you like open a folder and open another folder and double click a notepad file, you will discover you've made more than 100 event log entries for tiny little actions that are hard to understand. Sysmon gives you nice, simple, clear entries that say like a process started, a file created, a registry key created, much easier to understand. That's what it's for. Then you have FortiGate Firewall, putting out events. You have Microsoft's web server, IIS. There was some kind of Nessus scan run. I've never used that data. I'm not sure what that was about. Then there's stream data. Now, Splunk monitors the live network traffic, but unlike Wireshark, it doesn't save entire packet captures. It saves a summary of the conversations for various protocols like DNS and HTTP. So that's what these streams are. And then there's Suricata, which is an intrusion detection system that sends alerts. So all that data is sent over the network to a central server, which archives it all, and Splunk lets you easily search that data on that central server. So the first thing we're going to do is technically, you're supposed to specify the index when you search. You can sort your data, you can add an index to it, and as a best practice, they like to have you specify the index. In fact, in our case, there's only one index in use, so you don't really need this. If you search, you're going to find nothing because it only looks in the last 24 hours. You're going to have to switch it to all time. Now, here's a thing that's sort of screwy about Splunk. The time it takes is dependent on how many results it finds. So if I search for all time, it's going to find 1 million results, and that'll be slow. So I'm going to turn on event sampling, say 1 in 100. It'll just show me a random 1% of the results. So I'm going to get an overview, but it'll speed things up. Now it's going to search through all time. And as you see, here it is finding some events. And it didn't take very long to find about 10,000 events because there's really 1 million events. So I have a quick summary of them. All right. And I can see various source types here. Now, what I'd like to do is look at web traffic. Let me go back here. We talked about the source types. Okay. Now I could put in this source type equals stream HTTP, or I could go down here and look at the source types of things it's found. And then I could just click one of these. Here's stream HTTP. If I just click it, it will type it up there for me. Stream equals HTTP. And that way I don't have to deal with forgetting whether to put in the quotes or the colon and things like that. So this is now the web traffic. I'm only looking at 1% of it, and there's 234 events. All right. So now, all right. Now, this company, they made the domain name I'm really not Batman.com because they made the scenario for their fictional company based on a Batman movie that was popular at that time. So if I add the name of my domain name here, it's going to find events that contain that. So you can use Splunk to do grep type search like you can with Google. You just put in a word and then it will find any event that has that word anywhere in the event. You can be more specific and say, look for this particular field like source type to be this. But if you just put in a word, it'll find events that have that word somewhere in the event. And so when I search, now I'm down to only 188 events. So I think I'm going to turn off the sampling and just see them all with no event sampling. And that should give me about 18,000 events. It's still searching until you see a green check mark up here. 22,000. That should be about as many as it's there. It's done. 22,200 events. Now you can look at these events and you see them here spaced out into fields. And here you see the source content. This document moved source headers 303. It's a referral from IIS. And I should see the request headers there. There's the request 303 see other. That's pretty boring. If I scroll down here, here's form data, doing some kind of search. And I shouldn't have to search. Yep, here I am, already found attack traffic. You can see here, this is being sent from Acunetics. That's a vulnerability scanner. What the bad guys did was they ran an automated scan to find the vulnerabilities of the server, which is something they do frequently. And they used a pirated version of Acunetics, and they didn't even bother to remove these marks. By default, commercial scanners will put a label in every scan attack because, of course, it'll set off all your intrusion detection systems. All the scans are obviously malicious. And here you'll see that it labels it with this. So there's the scanner. And that, by the way, is the first flag. So now you've found malicious traffic, and the scanner name is the first flag. The next one is the attacker's IP address. Once you find any traffic from the scanner, then obviously the source of that is the attacker's IP. And you'll want to keep notes of this stuff because it's going to be important later on. I'm going to open a new page in my text editor here. So the source of this stuff, one of the problems about Splunk is that each source of log data uses different descriptions for the same thing. So there's source IP somewhere. Yep. And there's also something called client IP, which is the same thing. That's one thing about it, which can be confusing. Anyway, this address starting with 40 is the source IP. So this is the attacker IP. All right. I'm saving that. So we'll have it for later. That's 40. Okay. And that's another flag. Now, next thing is the IP of the web server, and that's, of course, the destination of this traffic coming in, scanning the web server. So that would be destination IP, starts with 192. So that's the web server. So I'm going to save that too, web server. All right, you need these things as you go ahead. All right. Now, the next thing, we're going to find the defacement file name, and this is where you really start to see the amazing power of Splunk. See, in a properly configured network, you have traffic control. The server can only be a server and never a client. You can have incoming requests coming to your web server and replies coming out, but your web server should never make an outgoing HTTP request out on the web. If you want to put something on the web server, you don't open a browser on the web server and download it. You download it somewhere else, scan it for viruses, and move it over with a file share protocol or something. And the reason you do that, there's two reasons. In the first place, you don't want to infect your web server with malware, so you don't want people downloading directly on it. But a bigger reason is attacks typically make reverse shells. They will get execution on a server, and then they will make an outgoing request to the command and control server. So to prevent that, you never let your web server make a direct connection out. Because if it's making one of those, it's probably a bad guy taking over your server. As we're going to see, this network is not properly configured to prevent that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at all the HTTP events, which is what we have here, and we're going to look at the source of those HTTP events. So down here, we'll find a source IP, and I'm just going to find it and click on it. Okay, here's the source IP. So there's a couple of different source IPs. I'm just going to pick either of these. It doesn't matter right now. Because this is the traffic. I just want the right syntax here. This is traffic coming from the attacker. I'm going to paste in the web server's address as the source IP. This should never happen. There should never be an HTTP request originating from the web server. This is traffic going backwards through the network, and it shouldn't be allowed. Now here I have 0 results, but that's not really true because I left in the I'mReallyNotBatman.com, and that's the domain name of the web server. If it makes an outgoing request, it will be going somewhere else, not to its own domain. So I have to remove that from the query. And now this will be what traffic actually went backwards through the network. And there will be a few of these. See, I found 2 of them so far. There are 8 events. There are 8 times out of 1 million events, there are 8 of them that went backwards through the network. And that's why people pay so much money for Splunk. It is so easy to pick these important events out of a giant pile of unimportant events. And now, when you look at these, you'll see what they did. They went to get an image. Here's the name of the image they used. They used it to deface the web page. You can find out a domain name they went to where they're running a web server on a strange port 1337. It's not a normal web server. It's a staging server where the attackers have put attack code like this image that they're going to use. And you can see just a few things they did going backwards here. And that's a few more flags to find about these. What was the defacement file name? What's the other domain name they went to? What was the staging server IP? And so on. So that should get you started. I'm going to stop this video, let you start doing those.